Okay, guys. So the question that this panel poses is framed in a slightly negative way. Will Web3 gaming ever be mainstream? So what does mainstream success look like in Web3 gaming? Is it a particular sort of number of users? Is it when we stop calling it Web3 gaming and just call it gaming?
So I'll take this one. In my view, I think when we think about what Web3 is, that is its heart, it's actually infrastructure. And so I think in my mind, when Web3 gaming becomes mainstream, it's when we actually stop talking about Web3. In a similar way to when we think about online games 10 years ago, we used to talk about them as online games because most games were not yet online multiplayer. But now we don't say that anymore because we just assume all games are online. So in a similar way, I expect personally that all games will use blockchain infrastructure and Web3 at a certain point in time. The only question is when.
And how do we get to that point? What's the current lie of the land? Who is the Web3 gamer at the moment? What demographics do they fall into?
So I have overseen a part of the audience raising their hand up, saying they're gamers. It was very few of you, so I don't believe that. I've seen like 2 or 3 hands up. I don't think that's the case. So speaking about who is a gamer, and then who is a Web3 gamer, I think that I used to ask this question a couple of times, and then I realized that the way how people identify themselves being a gamer is then they would not put their hands up, and then you learn they're at level 1000 at Candy Crush, which I do consider them to be a gamer. If you have a room of 12-year-olds and you would ask them who is a gamer, your question would probably indicate who is aiming to be a professional gamer, because everybody would be a gamer in the sense that being somehow in interaction with games. Now, that does not really involve technology. So as we move alongside the adoption curve, and it's with any technology or with any trend, starting with innovators, small percentage of people being seen as perhaps crazy or misfits, and then going into early adopters, those misfits turn to be super cool. And then we're touching on the early majority. I think we can easily say that gaming is in the majority, even though the hands were not up. But we will see this generational fit as well. We maybe now have the first innovators or the early adopters being seen as Web3 gamer crazy. But as we move along, they will hopefully turn into the majority adoption, and it will not be a Web3 gamer anymore. It will just be a gamer playing a specific style of games and appreciating the fact that whatever is in the game, they own.
And does it differ in terms of who's playing what types of games in different regions of the world? You focus mostly on casual games. What's the player base like for them?
So it does differ, right? Even if you take the segment of casual games, you would have a behavior that ranges from casual into hardcore. So even across the casual style games, some people go really hardcore. They're very engaged in that game. So and equally on that scale, you can create a segment on how heavy you are on the Web3. So you can be very light, owning an NFT and not really doing anything, or you can be on the scale of being an expert, understanding liquidity pools and doing all of those things. So you kind of have 4 segments, and they appear all at the same time at different sizes. So what we naturally see when we say casual games, we think about very light engagement with games, with casual games, but also light engagement with Web3. But you see all of that spectrum. And the casual games, because they're accessible, anybody can play them with their mobile phones, they have this promise that they will be able to basically transfer people and show them more to explore in Web3, more complicated concepts than just owning one NFT.
But also there's the challenge of onboarding, particularly casual gamers. What are some of the sort of technological hurdles that need to be overcome in terms of onboarding people? What's the current landscape?
It's a challenge. I think even people who know how to set up a wallet and know how to get into these environments still have a challenge. And to your point, it's like a lot of this is around kind of the perception and the technology challenges. I think what we all want to get to, and I think Web3 has a little bit of a cloud sitting over it, because I think people in general just paint it with the crypto brush and the NFT brush, and I don't think people really understand that it is, effectively an architecture that allows for, some of the ideals that we hear about, like, self-sovereign data, portable identity, being able to move between worlds seamlessly. And so as you own assets, ideally we want to be able to move them from world to world. We were talking about, well, what would that look like in very different worlds? But that's a design mechanic, right? And I think from a technology standpoint, if we do get there, it enables all kinds of things. And you brought up something that's interesting. It's like the people who identify as gamers. Gaming is going to start to influence every single aspect of people's lives, because what it does is it drives better behavior. And if we do make the effort to sort of take more control of our data, then we can start using that data to have better health, to do our jobs better, and AI is going to sit behind that. So it's part of the bigger technology shift that's happening now, but we're building the plane as we're flying it. And so this is the challenges you have with, that approach.
I mean, to drill down into that question of attitudinal issues, traditionally, when you're sort of trying to onboard people to a new technology, you want the hardcore to come on board with you. But hardcore gamers are, by and large, vehemently anti-crypto, anti-NFT, despite the fact that, in many cases, it solves for the problems that they currently have, like extractive practices in the gaming industry. How do we win them over? Is it a lost cause? Do we need to seek out other demographics, or can you get the gaming hardcore on board?
I think it actually goes back to your one of your earlier questions, which is thinking about different kinds of geographies. So, for example, we're headquartered in Asia, and Asian audiences, by and large, have very much embraced games using Web3 infrastructure where they can own assets, because to them it seems like a natural evolution. When I spend money to buy virtual goods, I should own those virtual goods. I think the so-called backlash has largely been amongst Western gamers, or gamers in Western countries. And I think it comes from the misperception that gaming is about fun. And games, yes, they're about fun, but everybody spends money in games. There's a reason that game developers can make a living, and there's $200 billion a year spent on virtual goods that nobody actually owns. I mean, there's a lot of economics going on in games as well. And some of the most successful platforms for creating games and building community in games, like Roblox and Minecraft, have huge volumes of transactions and people essentially buying and selling goods with each other in a very limited way at very heavy losses, right? So in Roblox, of course, if you want to cash out of Roblox, your money is only worth 50% of the face value. I mean, it's terrible. It really only benefits one party, which is the centralized company that owns it. And we hope that in Web3 we can have a much more fair and equitable infrastructure where everybody can benefit from owning their own stuff.
I mean, the centralized gaming companies have it pretty cushy at the moment. They're making a nice living carving off half the value there. What's the incentive for them to get on board Web3 gaming? And broadly speaking, what's the attitude like among traditional game publishers to the Web3 gaming space? You'd like to field that one?
From all the big gaming companies that I know, they have some activity in that space because they do not want to miss the trend. They do not want to miss the wave. At the same time, they are careful protecting their profits, right? The current business model. So the approach with Asian publishers is a lot more aggressive and brave, I would say. The approach in West is a bit more careful. To maybe add on to your previous question, why the backlash was so strong. I don't think it was that much. I think it was like events that made the headlines. It wasn't as big, but it could have been the way how it was put in front of the community by the publisher, as it appeared to be additional way to extract money from the community, because it met together in timeline. It met together with some high-valued NFTs making headlines at the same time. So these two stories connected, and it appeared to be additional monetization source instead of being a different approach where the community gets value as well. Now, the story of ownership is pretty abstract. It's hard to explain to somebody who's not searching for the answer. It's like offering a solution to somebody who doesn't know there is a problem. So there is a way, and I don't think anybody has nailed that 100%, how and when to tell the story to gamers. Because for us in the industry, it sounds obvious. If you own something, it's better than if you don't, right? But having a way and the right moment to tell the story to existing excited community is a skill that has to be nailed.
I mean, well, I think also one point to add on that is that if you look at the NFT marketplace last year, so all NFTs, some were in games and some not in games, about $36 billion was spent on NFTs last year, but 90% of that went to the creators of those NFTs. Not to middlemen, not to marketplaces, not to fees. 90% of that money went to the original creators. And that's an amazing thing because I'm sure everybody's heard of the stories of how much creators on platforms like Spotify and YouTube, etc., make. And it's not 90%.
Isn't it also part of the problem that some gamers have made it part of their identity to be anti-NFT and anti-crypto? I mean, how do you overcome that?
Well, again, it's around perception. It's around the simplicity of the technology. But to go back to what Robby was saying, we talk in these abstract terms about the creator economy, but this is it, and this is sort of the benchmark. And it's a way also to invite, everyone into the global economy in any way. And games is simply one avenue. Art is another avenue. You're seeing a lot of really interesting business models emerge around, NFTs, around even the very beginning creation of, filmed entertainment, like we were talking about. I have a friend who's, written a rock opera. He's selling one of each of the songs as NFTs, and everyone who participates, if it does go to Broadway, will then be part of the profits. It's not to say that this is where we'll land in terms of business models, but it's an important component in thinking about how do we have a new parallel digital economy, because this is an infinite landscape. And I understand that we need sort of scarcity and guardrails now going in so that we can kind of build the space. But the bigger opportunity is to really build a much more inclusive economic construct. And believe it or not, this is the model. This is the very beginning.
Totally agree, because I think if you look at one of the things that Web3 does really well is it's used different kinds of mechanics to bind communities together as you help create those communities. But one of the things about those communities is that if you do that in a Web2 construct, you're essentially building the community for the platform who then owns it. Whereas in Web3, we're building communities for ourselves because the community actually owns all of the assets and the IP of the things that they co-create. And that's a really important differentiation.
Is that not a wrench for sort of traditional brands, not just gaming brands, but brands more general as they try to enter this world of the metaverse, this idea that they will have to relinquish some degree of control over the IP that they own and they've built their brands on for the last 100 years or so?
I would say yes and no, only to the extent that, if you buy an automobile, you can have it repainted how you like it because you want to personalize that object you own in the way that you like.
Unless it's a
but
Ferrari.
It doesn't change, well, and you could do that to a Ferrari as well. But it doesn't change who owns the original IP.
Mm. Yeah. I think it's, and I'm very cavalier about IP, and it's very unpopular, especially with people who hold a lot of IP. But I'm going to give the example of Grimes, who just put an AI-powered version of her voice out on a platform that is basically an embedded smart contract. So she's just saying, here's my voice. If you want to make a song, then you then will ascribe to, we're going to split the proceeds 50-50, right? And this is now co-creation on a new level, but also not being so precious about mine, but actually having a much more expansive view of what this opportunity is. And at your core, your IP can be inspiration for hundreds and thousands and millions of other artists. And so, I think this is just a moment of reinvention. And hopefully we don't squander the opportunity to make something really interesting here.
I mean, Amy, your company, EndeavorXR, focuses on exploring horizontal use cases of XR technology. So you have a cross-industry perspective. How do you see, or what insights are other industries on how other industries are using XR feeding into the world of gaming?
Yeah, I think it's very relevant to brands because if you look at the landscape, retail, art, entertainment, music, social media, in games, it's really all blending. And so the brands that are really doing a good job have kind of an end-to-end strategy about how and where to engage the consumer. But the most important element that Web3 gaming and the Web3 construct allows is for a one-to-one relationship between a brand and its customer. And there could be an amazing economic construct around a transparent exchange of value for data. So we have to stop the data harvesting. We're going to have devices that are going to be, displaying our biometric data. So, this is where the opportunity is. And, in the same, in my same unpopular IP vein, we have to be more transparent as companies. Like, what are we afraid of? I mean, I'm not saying rip the Band-Aid off tomorrow, but be more transparent about your practices. Ask for data nicely. Offer value in return. Be responsible. Show the provenance of your products. Where are they manufactured? How are they manufactured? Just be better and share. And it's a lofty ideal, and it's hard for companies to embrace. But some are doing it really well.
In terms of the broader sort of Web3 gaming investment landscape, what's the current state of it? What are you guys looking for when you're investing in Web3 gaming projects?
Sure. I think this year, obviously, has been a big sort of global economic downturn. It's hit the Web3 industry particularly hard because we're an early stage and quite, sort of forward-leaning technology. And so I think what we see now in terms of games in Web3, most of the projects that we look at tend to be a bit more mature than they were in a couple of years ago because, the shoe is on the other foot. It's really all about the investors being in the driver's seat because capital is more scarce. So when we evaluate projects, usually they are already in some kind of early alpha or they have some kind of vertical slice developed so that there's something that you can get your heads around and play with and understand how focus groups are starting to think about the product. So I would say the investing stage is still early, but a little bit later than before.
And the other elephant in the room, of course, is regulatory uncertainty. I mean, what's your view on that? I don't know who wants to field that one.
It's coming.
I'm happy to take the regulatory one. I think, obviously, regulation varies widely by jurisdiction. I think what we've seen this year is a very tumultuous ride for people in the US jurisdiction because regulation seems to be ebbing and flowing and there's lots of tea leaf reading to try to understand what's going on. On the other hand, in Asia, I think we've had a lot more clarity from regulators who perhaps haven't had much to say up until this year, particularly in our hometown of Hong Kong, where now there's a lot more clarity specifically around trying to differentiate within Web3 and things that are tokenized as digital assets, where there are differences between entertainment products and financial services products and how we treat user privacy and user data. And I think that's actually a really good thing because the more sensible regulation around these things we have, then the more actively investors are going to be considering investing in the space.
In terms of tailoring the pitch of Web3 gaming to different demographics, again, how do you target different types of gamer? I mean, with a focus on casual gamers, I guess that's...
Yeah, we have a large global gaming audience playing casual games on mobile phones. So our demographic would be age-wise really broad, and it's in 100+ countries. So when thinking about the onboarding, I think it's good to set a realistic goal, like what does count as onboarding, right? And what do you want to see? And we have tested various different approaches, and we have recently come to a conclusion that it's really important to find a moment when the person cares about the game enough to do this extra step, this leap of faith into something they haven't thought about or explored before, like having a wallet, for example. And that was not the first thing to offer to the player because it was not something they looked for. So we have seen some Web3 games, they offered to purchase NFT to play the game first. In that case, the target audience was somebody who's already savvy and knows exactly what they're doing. In the case when approaching more a mainstream audience playing games, this has to be reverted. So in our most recent product, we have completely reverted the steps, offering a gameplay and identifying the moment, which is usually people come back to the game, they have built something customized, so there are signals of they care, and then offering the moment, and now you can own it, and only then tell the story, what does that mean? So far that has been the path to onboarding, which means having a first wallet, doing the extra steps, and understanding there is NFT, if you want, that you own. Now the next step that I think matters a lot to really understand the idea of Web3 is to spark curiosity to go explore beyond one game. Because it's not only the one game where you own things, but it's the idea that you can transfer them into something else or connect to other worlds. It's the open metaverse, if you want. And here we're trying to see curiosity sparkles for people to go and explore other projects. So we would be offering different game items as rewards from various different partners. We have done partnerships with 30 different companies within that space that serve as an invitation to go and explore what's being built in that space. And this is a journey. It doesn't happen on the day one people install the app, but it pays off. So taking people through that journey really works. Would also work, and we have mentioned that a little bit, is working with known IPs. This is a global IP, has emotional attachment to it, people are fans, they care about it. And when they realize, okay, this is something I like, I may own, it's an easier sell.
And we were talking about this earlier, actually, this idea that hitherto we've mostly been talking about the idea of moving digital assets between games as a technical challenge, but what about the creative challenges of doing that? If you want to take a sword from one game into a, I don't know, modern game, what does that actually look like? How does it affect the balance of the game? What about the aesthetics?
Yeah, I want to, because I come at it from a different standpoint, and again, I don't think this is necessarily right, but you could very semi-easily think of it just in terms of skinning based on whatever the feeling or the assets that are important in that game might be. And I think that's an opportunity to kind of, append. So if you move from one world to another and you're in a very dark and moody, scary world, and then you move into this sort of bright, sunny world, that there will be artists that have skins that are relevant and will build a new value construct. So again, it goes into kind of reinventing these business models and leveraging these digital assets and the ability to append a lot of data and information to them so that they stay connected between worlds. And anyway, but I'd love to hear how you're looking at it in terms of practically solving the problem.
So this is where I put in a little plug for our nonprofit, because we actually have something called the Open Metaverse Alliance for Web3, OMA3, which we co-founded together with 25 other companies in the Web3 space. And the idea behind OMA3 was precisely to try to work on these problems because they are hard. There are technical problems, there are legal problems, there are just problems of, if you have a red sword and you bring it into blue world, should it be blue or is it still red? There are all kinds of problems you would never think of. And so we wanted to create a forum led by the people who are in the Web3 industry to discuss these and try to solve these problems for ourselves, because we want it to be a ground-up, community-led solution as we build standards for interoperability.
So maybe one more thing before we run out of time to the sword, because I think that's one of the questions that keeps coming back, like how could that work, right, with the game balance and everything. So there is another point of view on that takes you more towards so traditional gaming company or tech company would ask who owns the user, and the user they would see as owned if they register on their platform, right? In this Web3 thinking, with this Web3 mindset, it's not who owns the user, rather it's what the user owns that gives them access to different worlds. So if you want to see it through the lens of user acquisition, one game that is new on the market can look into different swords being owned by players in another game, and they can offer something for everybody who has the sword to come and do in their game. So it's not really stealing gamers from one game to another. It's connecting these worlds for people to be able to enjoy more experiences with the asset they own. But for the game developer, what's in it for them? It's actually inviting user base over to another game instead of spending millions of dollars in advertising, for example. So that's another point of view on this interoperability, how that can play.
I think we're about to run up against our time limit, but if we're here in 2024, will Metaverse, will Web3 gaming be mainstream by then? What needs to happen in the next year to make that happen?
I think, honestly, it's a natural evolution. I think what you will see is probably the number of games that have blockchain infrastructure in them, you know, to put a number out there, I would say will increase by anywhere from 50 to 100% over the next year, because there are so many great projects in development, and they will continue to launch over time, and we've seen that this year compared to last year.
I think we just want to see more great games that will make people excited. That's all it takes.
What I hope happens is that every one of you in this room that does not have a wallet, go get a wallet and do some exploration, because I think you'll be very surprised. It's very easy to point fingers and read news articles with spectacular headlines about the evils of NFTs and crypto. But until you really experience it and you start to experience, more importantly, the community, it's hard to have a real opinion. So do us all a favor, just start with a wallet, start exploring, and then we'll talk about this next year.
I could carry on this conversation all day, but we've run out of time. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.